Black legends who died in the 21st century that will shock you. Some black legends had decades to build their legacy. Others were gone just as the world was realizing how much they still had left to give. Behind these deaths are sudden accidents, hidden illnesses, violence, and final moments that stunned millions. Subscribe to Black Legends Revealed and stay with us as we revisit the losses the world still hasn't forgotten. Aaliyah. Aaliyah Dana Houghton was an American R&B singer and actress whose career was already expanding far beyond music when her life ended at only 22. By 2001, she had released 3 studio albums starred in Romeo Must Die and developed a distinctive sound that helped push contemporary R&B in a new direction. On August 25, 2001, Aaliyah had just finished filming the music video for Rock the Boat in the Bahamas. That evening, she and members of her team boarded a Cessna 402B at Marsh Harbor Airport for a flight to Florida. Moments after takeoff, the aircraft crashed near the airport. Aaliyah, the pilot, and 7 other passengers were killed. How could a routine flight home from a music video shoot become the final chapter of one of R&B's most promising young careers? The circumstances became even more troubling as investigators examined the flight. The aircraft was found to have been substantially overloaded, and later testimony revealed that pilot Luis Morales had cocaine in his urine and traces of alcohol in his stomach. The timing made the loss especially painful. Aaliyah's self-titled 3rd album had been released only weeks earlier, debuting at number 2 in the United States. Her film career was also growing, with additional projects already being discussed. More than 2 decades later, songs such as Try Again, 1 in a Million, and More Than a Woman still carry her voice, while artists continue to cite her sound image and understated style as an influence. Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant spent his entire 20-year NBA career with the Los Angeles Lakers, winning 5 championships and becoming an 18-time All-Star. By the time he retired in 2016, the man known as the Black Mamba had already secured his place among basketball's biggest names. Nothing, however, prepared fans for the morning of January 26, 2020. Bryant, 41, boarded a Sikorsky S-76B helicopter with his 13-year-old daughter Gianna and 7 others. They were traveling toward a youth basketball tournament at Bryant's Mamba Sports Academy. Fog covered parts of the Los Angeles area as the helicopter approached the hills near Calabasas. At about 9:46 a.m., the aircraft entered a rapid descending turn and crashed into the hillside. Everyone aboard was killed. How can someone seen by millions as almost indestructible be gone during an ordinary Sunday morning trip with his daughter? The news spread within minutes and stunned far more than the basketball world. Fans gathered outside Staples Center, leaving flowers, jerseys, basketballs, and handwritten messages, while NBA players struggled through games that same day, knowing Bryant was dead. The tragedy became even harder to process because Gianna died beside him. Bryant had often spoken proudly about her love of basketball and had been coaching her as she pursued the sport herself. A federal investigation later concluded that pilot Ara Zobayan continued flying under visual flight rules into conditions that required instrument flying. The NTSB determined that spatial disorientation caused him to lose control of the helicopter. Kobe had survived 2 decades of punishing NBA competition. His life ended not beneath arena lights, but on a fog-covered California hillside beside the daughter whose basketball future he had been helping build. Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman was an American actor best known as King T'Challa in Marvel's Black Panther. Before Wakanda made him a global star, he had already earned acclaim portraying black historical figures, including Jackie Robinson in 42, James Brown in Get On Up, and Thurgood Marshall in Marshall. What the public did not know was that Boseman was fighting colon cancer during the most famous years of his career. His family revealed that he was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 2016. The disease eventually progressed to stage 4. He kept the diagnosis private and continued working while undergoing surgeries and chemotherapy. How many people watching Black Panther realized that the man carrying one of Hollywood's biggest superhero roles was also undergoing cancer treatment? During those 4 years, Boseman completed films, including Black Panther Avengers, Infinity War Avengers Endgame, Day 5 Bloods, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. His final performance as trumpeter Levy in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom later earned him a posthumous Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. On August 28, 2020, Boseman died at his home at age 43 with his wife and family beside him. The announcement stunned audiences because his illness had never been publicly disclosed. The loss felt especially sudden because Boseman had only recently reached the height of his career. Black Panther made T'Challa a cultural symbol, while Boseman became one of Hollywood's most visible black leading men. Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle spent years building his name independently before Victory Lap finally pushed him into the mainstream. The 2018 album earned him a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album, while his work outside music included business investment and community projects in South Los Angeles. On March 31, 2019, Hussle was standing outside his Marathon clothing store in South Los Angeles when Eric Holder Jr. approached him. After a brief exchange, Holder left, returned with a handgun, and opened fire. Hussle was struck multiple times while 2 other men were wounded. He was taken to a hospital but died from his injuries at only 33 years old. How could a man who had survived years of street violence be killed in broad daylight outside the very business he created to invest in his own neighborhood? The location made the killing especially difficult for many fans to process. Hussle had deliberately remained connected to the area where he grew up, using his money and influence to support businesses, education, and efforts aimed at reducing gang violence. Holder was arrested 2 days later. In July 2022, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter. In February 2023, he received a sentence of 60 years to life in prison. The cruelest detail was where Nipsey's life ended. Marathon clothing represented ownership independence and his decision to put money back into South Los Angeles. On that same pavement outside that same store, the future he had been building was suddenly cut short. Takeoff. Takeoff-born Kurznik Kari Ball was an Atlanta rapper best known as one-third of Migos alongside Quavo and Offset. Quiet off stage but technically sharp on records, he helped the trio become one of the defining rap groups of the 2010s, with hits including Versace Stir Fry and Bad and Bougie. On November 1, 2022, Takeoff was attending a private party at 810 Billiards and Bowling in Houston. After the gathering ended, an argument broke out outside the venue and gunfire followed. Takeoff was shot in the head and back and died at the scene. He was only 28. 2 other people were wounded. Houston police later said Takeoff had not been involved in the argument or the dice game that preceded the shooting, describing him as an innocent bystander. How does someone standing outside a party uninvolved in the dispute suddenly become the person who never gets to go home? His death came when he was entering a new stage of his career. Just weeks earlier, Takeoff and Quavo had released their collaborative album Only Built for Infinity Links, showing that he was still actively developing music beyond Migos. The loss hit Atlanta hip-hop especially hard. Thousands gathered at State Farm Arena for a public memorial, while artists across the industry paid tribute. Takeoff had spent years as Migos' understated presence. At 28, that career ended not through illness or an accident, but through a burst of gunfire from a dispute police said was never his. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was an American singer and actress whose extraordinary voice made her one of the most successful recording artists of her generation. With more than 200 million records sold worldwide, 11 #1 singles and 6 Grammy Awards, she became known simply as The Voice. By the 1990s, Houston was everywhere. Her version of I Will Always Love You from The Bodyguard became one of her defining recordings, while films such as Waiting to Exhale and The Preacher's Wife expanded her career beyond music. But behind that success, her struggles with drug use became increasingly public and eventually overshadowed much of her later career. How does someone with one of the most recognizable voices in the world end up dying alone in a hotel bathtub at only 48? On February 11, 2012, Houston was found unresponsive and submerged in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel one day before the Grammy Awards. She was pronounced dead that afternoon. The Los Angeles County coroner later ruled her death an accidental drowning with atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use listed as contributing factors. The news stunned the music industry. Houston had been expected to attend events surrounding Grammy weekend, and instead the celebration became a night of mourning. Her final years were complicated, but they never erased what came before. Decades after her death, Houston's recordings still demonstrate why so many singers continue to measure themselves against the power control and emotional force of her voice. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was preparing for one of the biggest comebacks of his career when his life ended without warning. At 50, the King of Pop was rehearsing in Los Angeles for This Is It, a planned series of 50 concerts at London's O2 Arena. On the night of June 24, 2009, he completed another rehearsal at Staples Center and returned home afterward. The following morning, Jackson was unable to sleep. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, had been treating his insomnia with several sedatives and ultimately administered propofol, a powerful anesthetic normally used in medical settings. Later that day, Jackson was found unresponsive at his Los Angeles home. Attempts to revive him failed, and he was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center on June 25, 2009. How could an entertainer preparing to perform before hundreds of thousands of fans be alive at rehearsal one night and gone the next afternoon? The Los Angeles County coroner determined that Jackson died from acute propofol intoxication, with the effects of benzodiazepines contributing, and officially classified his death as a homicide. Attention soon turned to Murray and the medical care Jackson had received inside his home. In November 2011, a Los Angeles jury convicted Murray of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years in jail and ultimately served about 2. What stunned the world most was the timing. Jackson had spent his final days rehearsing songs and choreography for audiences expecting his return. Instead, footage meant to prepare for future concerts became the last moving images of him performing the final rehearsal of a career that ended before the comeback could even begin. Lisa Left Eye Lopes. Lisa Left Eye Lopes was the rapper and creative spark of TLC, the Atlanta trio that became one of the defining R&B groups of the 1990s. Alongside Tion T-Boz Watkins and Rosanda Chili, Thomas Lopes helped shape hits such as Waterfalls, No Scrubs, and Creep, while her playful delivery and unmistakable personality made her stand out even within the group. In 2002, Lopes traveled to Honduras, where she often went for spiritual retreats and charity work. Cameras were following her during the trip for what would later become the documentary, The Last Days of Left Eye. On April 25th, while driving a rented Mitsubishi Montero near La Ceiba, she lost control of the SUV after swerving on the road. The vehicle rolled several times. Lopes was thrown from the vehicle and died from severe head injuries. She was only 30. How haunting is it that cameras documenting a new chapter of her life were still rolling when that journey suddenly became her last? Several other people were inside the SUV and survived. Lopes was the only person killed. Footage from the trip was eventually incorporated into the VH1 documentary released in 2007. Her death abruptly ended plans for both her solo career and TLC's next chapter. Yet Left Eye's versus eccentric style and willingness to expose her struggles remained central to TLC's identity. More than 2 decades later, T-Boz and Chili continue honoring her as the missing third member of the group. Prince. Prince was still performing, recording, and controlling his own musical world when his death stunned fans in 2016, the Minneapolis-born artist behind Purple Rain 1999, and when Doves Cry had spent decades refusing to slow down, and just 1 week before his death, he performed 2 intimate piano concerts in Atlanta. On April 15, while flying home, Prince's private plane made an emergency landing in Moline, Illinois, so he could receive medical treatment. Reports later said first responders administered Narcan, a medication used in suspected opioid overdoses. 6 days later, on April 21, 2016, staff members found Prince unresponsive inside an elevator at his Paisley Park complex in Chanhassen, Minnesota. He was 57. How could an artist who had been performing before cheering crowds only days earlier suddenly be found dead inside the home and studio he had built around his music? The Midwest Medical Examiner determined that Prince died from fentanyl toxicity and ruled the death accidental. The report stated that he had self-administered the powerful opioid. The circumstances made his death even more troubling. Prince's representatives had contacted addiction specialist Dr. Howard Kornfeld the day before he died seeking help. Kornfeld's son arrived at Paisley Park the following morning intending to help arrange treatment, but instead became one of the people who discovered Prince's body. Prince had spent much of his life fiercely protecting his privacy. Only after his death did the public understand how serious his final health crisis had become. His last concerts were no farewell tour. Audiences watching him at the piano had no idea they were witnessing his final performances. DMX. DMX-born Earl Simmons was a New York rapper and actor whose rough voice, explosive delivery, and deeply personal lyrics made him one of hip-hop's biggest stars around the turn of the millennium. His 1998 debut, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, reached #1, beginning a run in which his first 5 studio albums all topped the Billboard 200. Behind that success was a struggle. DMX rarely tried to hide. He spoke openly about addiction, childhood trauma arrests, and his repeated attempts to rebuild his life. That tension between pain and faith became part of his music. Aggressive records such as Rough Riders Anthem and Party Up existed alongside prayers and songs about fear, guilt, and redemption. After surviving so many battles for so many years, did fans ever imagine that DMX's life would end at only 50? On April 2, 2021, DMX suffered a catastrophic cardiac arrest at his home and was rushed to White Plains Hospital in New York. He remained on life support for several days before his family announced his death on April 9th. Later reporting citing the Westchester County Medical Examiner's Office stated that acute cocaine intoxication triggered the heart attack which cut off circulation to his brain. His death brought an enormous response from hip-hop. A memorial at Brooklyn's Barclays Center drew tributes from longtime collaborators and friends, while Rough Riders motorcyclists accompanied his funeral procession. DMX had spent much of his career documenting a fight between addiction, anger, faith, and survival. In 2021, that fight finally ended. Virgil Abloh. Virgil Abloh was only 41 yet. By 2021, he occupied a position few black designers had ever reached in global luxury fashion. The Illinois-born designer founded Off-White, and in 2018 became Louis Vuitton's men's artistic director, the first black designer to hold that position at the French fashion house. Behind the runway shows, collaborations, and constant travel, however, Abloh was fighting an illness almost nobody outside his inner circle knew about. In 2019, doctors diagnosed him with cardiac angiosarcoma, a rare and aggressive cancer involving the heart. Abloh chose to keep the diagnosis private. According to his family, he underwent difficult treatments for more than 2 years while continuing to oversee major projects across fashion, art, and design. How many people watching Virgil walk onto runways and launch new collections realized he was undergoing cancer treatment at the same time? On November 28, 2021, his family announced that Abloh had died after his private battle with the disease. He was just 41 and left behind his wife Shannon and their 2 children. LVMH, Louis Vuitton, and Off-White publicly confirmed his death that day. The announcement stunned the fashion world largely because Abloh had never publicly revealed how sick he was. Only months earlier, he was still expanding his responsibilities within LVMH and producing new work. 2 days after his death, Louis Vuitton presented his planned collection in Miami as a tribute under the words, "Virgil was here." The designer who had spent his final years working through treatments was suddenly absent from the very world in which he had seemed constantly present. Michael K. Williams. Michael K. Williams was a Brooklyn-born actor whose portrayal of Omar Little on HBO's The Wire made him one of television's most unforgettable performers. He later played Chalky White in Boardwalk Empire and earned 5 Primetime Emmy nominations during a career built on characters who were often dangerous, wounded, and deeply human. Away from the screen, Williams was unusually open about his own struggles with addiction. He had spoken publicly about periods when drug use followed him even as his career was flourishing. That history made what happened in September 2021 especially painful. How could an actor admired by millions for portraying survival, so convincingly lose his own life to a drug sold to him just hours earlier. On September 6, 2021, Williams was found dead in his Brooklyn apartment at age 54. New York City's medical examiner ruled his death accidental, caused by acute intoxication involving fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and parafluorofentanyl. The investigation did not end there. Federal prosecutors later charged members of a drug trafficking crew connected to the substances Williams purchased. Prosecutors said dealer Irvin Cartagena sold Williams heroin containing fentanyl and a fentanyl analog on September 5, one day before he was found dead. Cartagena later pleaded guilty and was sentenced to prison. Williams died while still producing some of his strongest work. His performance as Montrose Freeman in Lovecraft Country earned him a posthumous Emmy nomination, leaving behind another reminder of how much acting he still had left to give. John Singleton. John Singleton was only 24 when Boys in the Hood made him the first black filmmaker ever nominated for the Academy Award for Best Director and the youngest director nominated at that time. He went on to direct Poetic Justice, Higher Learning, Shaft, Baby Boy, and Too Fast, Too Furious, while later co-creating the television series Snowfall. Then, in April 2019, his family was suddenly facing a crisis no one expected. Singleton suffered a major stroke on April 17th and was hospitalized in Los Angeles. His condition became critical, and he was placed on life support. His family later said Singleton had suffered from hypertension, bringing attention to a health problem that had apparently become far more dangerous than many people around him realized. How does a filmmaker still creating new projects at 51 suddenly reach a point where his family must decide whether to keep him alive by machines? For nearly 2 weeks, relatives and fans waited for better news. Instead, doctors determined that recovery was not expected. On April 29th, his family announced the agonizing decision to remove him from life support after consulting with his physicians. Singleton died that day surrounded by family and friends. He was 51 years old. The timing made his death especially shocking. Singleton had not retired or disappeared from Hollywood. Snowfall was still moving forward, and he remained involved in new work. The young filmmaker who once forced Hollywood to look directly at life in South Central Los Angeles was gone before reaching his 52nd birthday. For audiences who had followed him since Boys in the Hood, the suddenness of that final stroke made the news almost impossible to believe. Gerald Levert. Gerald Levert was an R&B singer-songwriter and producer known for his powerful, intimate vocal style. The son of OJ's lead singer, Eddie Levert, he first found success with the group. Levert alongside his brother Sean Levert and Mark Gordon, before building a major solo career, and later joining Keith Sweat and Johnny Gill in the supergroup LSG. On November 10, 2006, Levert was found dead at his home in Cleveland. He was only 40. Early reports suggested a heart attack, but the autopsy later revealed a very different explanation. The Cuyahoga County coroner determined that Levert died from acute intoxication caused by an accidental combination of prescription narcotics and over-the-counter medications. How could medications being used for ordinary pain and health problems suddenly become fatal for a singer only 40 years old? Among the substances found in his system were the painkillers, Vicodin, Percocet, and Darvocet, the anxiety medication, Xanax, and antihistamines. A family spokesman said the medications had been prescribed. Levert had been dealing with chronic shoulder pain and had undergone surgery after severing his Achilles tendon. The autopsy also found that he had pneumonia. His death was officially ruled accidental. The timing made the loss even harder. Levert had completed his final album, In My Songs, shortly before his death. Released posthumously in 2007, it eventually gave him his first Grammy Award when the title track won Best Traditional R&B Vocal Performance in 2008. Heavy D. Heavy D was one of hip-hop's most recognizable voices of the late 1980s and 1990s. Born Dwight Arrington Myers in Jamaica and raised in Mount Vernon, New York, he led Heavy D and the Boys and became known for songs such as Now That We Found Love. In 2011, he was still performing and appeared at the BET Hip Hop Awards in what became his final televised performance. Less than a month later, everything changed. On November 8, 2011, Heavy D returned to his Beverly Hills residence and began having serious trouble breathing. Building staff tried to help him inside, but he collapsed. When police arrived, he was still conscious, yet clearly struggling to breathe. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. He was only 44 years old. How could a man who had just returned to the stage looking energetic and confident suddenly collapse outside his home only weeks later? The answer did not become clear until the autopsy results were released. The Los Angeles County coroner determined that Heavy D died from a pulmonary embolism caused by deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot that formed in his leg and traveled to his lung. His death was classified as natural. Officials said the clot most likely developed during an extended airplane journey. Heavy D had recently returned from Britain after performing at a Michael Jackson tribute concert. That is what made his death so difficult to comprehend. There had been no public farewell and no long decline. Fans had watched Heavy D performing again, unaware that within weeks a hidden blood clot would end his life without warning. Bernie Mac. Bernie Mac born. Bernard Jeffrey McCullough was a Chicago comedian and actor whose fearless stand-up style made him one of the most recognizable black comedians of his generation. After breaking through on Def Comedy Jam, he joined Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hewley on the Kings of Comedy tour before starring in the hit sitcom The Bernie Mac Show. Behind his booming voice and relentless energy, Mac had lived for years with sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease that can affect the lungs. His condition was reported to have gone into remission around 2005. In July 2008, however, he was hospitalized at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago with pneumonia. His publicist said the pneumonia was not related to his sarcoidosis. How could a comedian who seemed almost impossible to slow down suddenly be fighting for his life in a hospital at only 50? Mac spent several weeks receiving treatment, including time in intensive care. On August 9, 2008, he died from complications of pneumonia. The news stunned audiences because his hospitalization had only recently been described publicly as stable. His death came while his film career was still active. Soul Men co-starring Samuel L. Jackson and Madagascar Escape 2, Africa, in which Mac voiced Zuba, were released after his death. Thousands later attended his public memorial in Chicago. Mac had spent decades turning family arguments, hardship, and everyday frustration into comedy. At 50, a career that still had room to grow ended far earlier than his audience expected. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross had spent more than 2 decades filling arenas with one of R&B's most recognizable voices when his health suddenly collapsed. The singer behind Never Too Much Here and Now and Dance with My Father had sold more than 25 million records and won multiple Grammys before suffering a massive stroke in April 2003. The stroke struck at his Manhattan home on April 16th. Vandross fell into a coma for weeks and later required extensive rehabilitation. His speech movement and ability to sing were badly affected, and he never returned to live performance. Can you imagine hearing that one of the greatest voices in R&B was suddenly struggling simply to speak the words he had once sung so effortlessly? The cruel timing made the situation even harder. Vandross had already completed Dance with My Father, which became one of the biggest albums of his career. While recovering, he won 4 Grammys in 2004, including Song of the Year for its title track. Unable to attend, he appeared through a pre-recorded video message. Vandross managed a rare public appearance on The Oprah Winfrey Show in May 2004, where the lingering effects of the stroke were clearly visible. On July 1, 2005, Luther Vandross died at a hospital in Edison, New Jersey. He was only 54. Hospital officials said he had never fully recovered from the devastating stroke 2 years earlier. For fans, the painful part was that his final major success arrived when he could no longer return to the stage and enjoy it with them. 18 unforgettable lives, 18 losses that left permanent marks on music, film, sports, and black culture. But which kind of loss hits harder, the sudden deaths no one saw coming, or the slow battles the public barely understood until it was too late? And do we truly appreciate our legends while they are still here, or only after their voices are gone? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Black Legends Revealed for more powerful stories behind the icons who shaped generations.